Well, it is officially the holiday season, which means it's time to see what St. Louis Blues GM Doug Armstrong has left under the tree for GM-in-waiting Alexander Steen. What kind of team are the Blues after their struggles to start this season? What are some of the biggest questions that need to be answered in the months to come? What will Steen and Army need to accomplish before the switch is made? And what pieces do they have to work with? What roles need to be filled? We're going to talk about all that and more on this episode of Note News. All right, welcome into another episode of Note News. We're a St. Louis Blues podcast. We go live twice a week, or I guess we are taking a small break from going live right now, but we try to at least make content twice a week. It's John and Alec back with you as always. It's been a little while. We've taken a bit of a break with Thanksgiving and into the semester stuff for me, but we're back now to talk about some big picture stuff. This is, as Blues fans know, the last year of Doug Armstrong's tenure as GM for the Blues before he moves on to a different role within the organization. I think he'll be just solely president of hockey ops after this season. And as was announced about a year and a half ago now, Alexander Steen will be taking over as GM of the future for the Blues. And so, as you said at the top, it's time to sort of do a State of the Union for the Blues and determine what big questions need to be answered. But before we dive into that, Alec, how are you doing? And I think we should talk about some of the big Blues headlines that we have missed in the past couple of weeks while we've been away for a little bit. But how's it going?
Pretty good. Got to see some Blues wins, which has been nice. They've won 3 out of
Yeah.
their last 5. So, don't call it a comeback. But, um, no, I mean,
Yeah, don't.
it's been
Yeah.
good. Yeah. um, it's been a busy holiday time for sure. But I'm kind of starting to dive back into hockey, and I think we've got some good topics to cover today.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you said, the Blues have gotten a few wins on the schedule. They, I think, were the last team to reach double-digit wins, and so they finally hit that mark last night with their win over Ottawa. That was a scrappy one, but yeah, that comes after two losses to Anaheim and Boston this week, and then the the other two wins that you're discussing in the previous 5 games came against Ottawa and Utah. So two against Ottawa, one against Utah, a couple losses in between. They play again this evening as we record against Montreal. That should be an exciting matchup. Montreal, one of the better teams in the East this year, at least to start the year they were, and exciting young team. So it should be a good test as the Blues continue to try and figure things out. But um, I mean, it's the year of the loser point, right? For the Blues, like they were the
Yep.
last team to reach double digit wins, but they were still even at that point ahead of the likes of Calgary, Vancouver, and Nashville in the standings, and that's because they have 7 overtime losses, and so that sort of helped them float around the mushy middle of the teams that are not in a divisional spot, I should say, and so yeah, as it stands today, they're still 4 points out of it. That kind of seems to be where they're hovering around. At one point, I think they were up to like 2 points out of it, or something like that, or maybe three. And so they've had some. I won't call them hot stretches. I'll just call them like warm stretches or lukewarm. Um, but I mean, continues to be a little bit baffling, a little bit frustrating. They kind of struggle to get anything figured out. But some of the big headlines I want to discuss before we get to our main segment of the day. As I said, it's been a little while, so I think the big thing, well, there's a couple big things. One of the first big things to discuss is that Alexander Texier is no longer a Blue, right? He has made the switch over to the Canadians, and it was not a trade. If any Blues fans are not aware, it was he was his contract was terminated with the Blues. He was put on waivers for the purposes of contract termination, and then he was a free agent and he signed a 1 year deal with Montreal. So now he is a Canadian. Kind of no surprise that the Frenchman went to the French Canadian team. So seemed to be a good fit for him there, and wish the best to him. But what does this mean for the Blues in your eyes, Alec? I mean, I think we're both feeling a little bit disappointed about what we've gotten out of Texier to this point because we were excited when he came over, and thought that trade was a really good one. And we weren't the only ones, so it's been a little bit frustrating to see the way this sort of marriage shook out between Tex and the Blues. But what are your thoughts on it now that it's over?
Yeah, it's kind of a letdown, for sure, that they didn't have the really room to play Texier. They didn't have the space for him on the team, and then in his looks, it's like there was always promise, there were always flashes, but it just seems like Texier is kind of a, I'll say like Scott Perunovich type player, like a quad A, um, type player that has the
Mm-hmm.
skill to match with anybody, but doesn't have the consistent night in, night out play. And I don't think that's anyone's fault per se. And I think the Blues did the right thing by moving on. Um, excuse me. Perhaps they did it a little early, but I still don't think that it's the worst decision in the world to cut your losses. And yeah, I mean, he scored a nice he scored a nice shootout goal. I don't know if you saw that one.
Did see that one. That's like again, like that's the type of skill that he has always had that we kind of hoped we would see in 5-on-5 play that we never did. But yeah.
Yeah. It just never really worked out with Tex, and I don't think that's anyone's fault. It just kind of is one of those hockey stories. You'll see a million of these, after watching the team for so long.
Mhm.
That I just it sucks, but it was bound to never really. The chances of anything good happening were always pretty low, anyways. So yeah,
Yeah, I think that's well said and well put. That it's kind of was just the outcome that needed to happen, and um, I don't think it was a case of the Blues giving up on someone too early necessarily because um, there were only I think a couple stretches in the last season and a quarter that he's been on the team where it kind of felt like he was earning regular playing time, and never really felt that he had done that at to a consistent degree. And so yeah, I think it was just time. And I mean, the play of Dalibor Dvorsky in his call up kind of necessitated it. I don't think you send Devo down. He's been a more productive player than Texier, and giving him the minutes is going to be more valuable to the organization in the long term than you know continuing to wait and see if Tex can put some together. So sucks to see him go since we were kind of he was one of those players that we had high hopes for, but like you said, not much else you can do to this point. Um, what else? Milan Lucic, his pro tryout was terminated. He was playing with AHL Springfield for a little bit there, but you know they decided to part ways. He did sign a PTO for preseason games, had some injury troubles, was signed to a second one to play in the AHL. But again, that has been terminated now. And so the 37-year-old Lucic will not be joining the Blues. I feel okay about that. I don't think he would have brought very much. Um, I don't think I think there are some players who kind of, or some fans, I should say, who kind of thought this is the type of player who can bring some grit and some drive to the lineup. Um, I don't know how much you would be getting out of Lucic. I think NHL play is would outpace him a little bit too much at this point. I'm not too broken up about this one. In fact, I'm a little bit more relieved than anything. But any thoughts on this one?
yeah. The issue with the Blues is not like the solution to the Blues problems. I don't think anyone would say is adding more old players to the
Yeah.
roster and uh, getting slower and easier to manipulate on the ice. it seems like they need to be going in the opposite direction. So
Yeah.
with Lucic, he never really got the chance, and I think that tells you all that you need to know about Lucic's story and what kind of impact he might have made for this team. I don't think the story of the season changes very much with him playing versus with him not, and there's just not much. No, I don't have much to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that one of the most struggling teams in the league didn't call him up, I think is telling of where he's at this point. So maybe time to hang him up. But um, yeah. In other news, like AHL related news, Logan Mailloux has been called back up to the Blues. He's been with them for a little bit now, and I'm not gonna say it's like he has done a 180, but I think he has done, maybe like a 90. He looks a little better. I think he's had some games where he looks a little bit more like the player we kind of hoped he would be. There was one game where instead of bottom left Mayu, it would have been top right Mayu. He was the best player on the ice when it comes to like net rating for that game. I'll see if I can find it now, but thoughts on Mayu in recent games as he has rejoined the club in St. Louis?
Yeah, he's showing a lot more promise for sure. He's showing that he can at least play some NHL minutes. I think the degree to which he does so is still to be determined, but
Yeah,
he's showing that he at least has something in there. Um, and I think with Mayu, the defense has still been really, really bad, but you've seen more offensive flashes, and really that transition game. You've seen that transition game start to show up more and be more of an impact. Uh,
yeah.
and so I really like the way that he's looked in the neutral zone, really,
Hmm.
versus in other parts of the ice. Like I still think in his own end, he doesn't offer much, and in the offensive end, he isn't the best puck handler, at least not yet. So there's still some work to be done there. But yeah, it's going to take time with Mayu, and it's going to take a lot of effort for sure. He looks very far off from being NHL ready, but at least you've seen that there is an NHL player in there in his last couple starts.
Yeah, so the game I'm referring to was the first win over Ottawa about a week ago or so now, a little more. Some good on ice stats, both excuse me, offensively and defensively, and so a much better game out of Mayu than really anything we saw prior to the demotion. And so, like you said, it's good to see flashes of an NHL-ish type player in there. And so, yeah, one to monitor for sure. And they go and play Montreal tonight, and so I think all eyes will be on Mayu and Bolduc for this one, and probably Texier to that end as well, to see how each of these players play against their former teams. So yeah, I think if he can truly turn a corner and start to have a productive season, not necessarily in point totals, but in terms of his development, that would be a huge win for the Blues, who are in desperate need of one right now. Yeah, hoping he can continue to figure things out. Some disappointing news that we do have to get to. The injury bug has bitten the Blues a little bit. The the big ones are that Toropchenko suffered quote scalding burns to his legs in a home accident and is considered week to week. So nothing really long term. I wouldn't think that would interfere with his ability to play hockey, of course, but hope he's okay. Um, if it's week to week, then I think that some pretty bad burns. So there's been some weird injuries in the league so far this year. So add that to the list. And Jimmy Snuggerud, I think, is the big one here. He is going to get surgery on his left wrist, and he's going to be reevaluated in 6 weeks. He's played up to the point where he was um, put on the IR. He played all 26 games up to that point and had 5 goals and 11 points, playing on the top line for most of the year. So it's a big blow, right? I mean, it's it sucks. I don't think there's really any other way of putting it. And then um, Kyrou did. I mean, Kyrou got hurt in last night's game as well, right? And so thoughts on these injuries and what they mean for the Blues moving forward. It just seems like they can't catch a break here.
Yeah, I mean, every team has to deal with um, injuries, and it
Right.
is an inevitability of playing hockey. But really, for it to happen to this Blues team after everything that they've gone through so far in the year, is just like such a slap in the face um, about like what they're able to do and not able to do, and it just sucks. Like it's just
Yeah.
such a right when there was any hope of anything becoming of this season, it immediately goes back to the worst possible scenario, especially losing guys like um, Jordan Kyrou. And there was a scare with Broberg. It ended up
Mm-hmm.
being okay. But if that had happened, if that had gone through, I mean, this team would be without its two best players, our only S tier players. And I guess Neighbors, I think, was on there too. But
I mean, he already had a long-term injury, so yeah.
yeah, and the team clearly suffered for it. Like they couldn't generate offense without Neighbors. He comes back and scores 2 goals in a game that 2 goals were scored. So
Mm-hmm.
clearly has the drive to help lead this team. But like losing players like that just sets you back so far, and especially when you can't already like buy a win or buy any goodwill for
Yeah.
something like that to happen. There was a chance, there was a real chance that this locker room could have imploded and the players would already be selling on the season. But you look at, even what they did last night, um, putting up a gutsy win in a game where they get outshot by like double the shot totals.
Yeah.
Hofer makes the stops and the team kind of comes together, and they're showing that through everything throughout, all this bad that has been the 2025-26 season, um that they've still got like the heart of a good team, and they still have a good culture built up throughout their struggles. Because there haven't been reports of like locker room fights. There
Mm-hmm.
haven't been reports of like people selling out on the season. Um, at least not more than what the struggles that everyone has had to start the year.
Right.
And to me, that is demonstrative of good culture, good team winning mentality. Even when you can't get the wins themselves, and for this season, wins and losses may or may not matter, if only just to get a draft pick. That's still a good sign of a franchise that is not lost,
Mm.
unlike some other places around the NHL. So the injuries suck, but I think there's actually a silver lining to be taken here.
Yeah, maybe so. I think the most disappointing thing, especially with Snuggerud, is that it kind of felt like he was one of the few bright spots for the team, showing some real good flashes here and there. Um, and in a season where they're struggling as much as they have, and a lot of Blues fans have already started to focus more on the future than this season in particular, I think Snuggerud kind of tops the list of players you're looking at and monitoring in that regard. And so to be without him for at least a month and a half, maybe more, it's definitely going to be tough. But I doubt his development will be like really harmed in any meaningful way. I think he already looks like a pretty mature player and sort of ahead of his age in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, just disappointing to see for sure. Um, a couple call ups as well. I mean, Kaskamaki played um, in last night's game, and was supposed to play in the one before that as well. And then who was the other one? Was it Skinner, Hunter Skinner? Got the call up and played a game as well. I don't know if we had talked about that, but any thoughts on the call ups and their performance and short stints so far?
Um, Not much on Skinner. Um, I think that was a fine move, but not one that really
Yeah,
inspires a lot of change in me. I
yeah.
do think that Kaskamaki is kind of a big name for me who follows prospects, and
Hmm.
I wouldn't say don't Blues fans don't expect Kaskamaki to suddenly become the next big name in the Blues uh, lore, but
Right.
I think that there is a level of intrigue for me with what he's potentially able to do in the offense that he's going to generate. Just you want to talk about one of the best young players that Springfield had the last couple of years, being him and Pekarchik, and like the way that they can um, the way that they can provide an injection of youth and speed to this lineup, I think can't go underappreciated. Um, and I really do believe that Kaskamaki can be something of a spark for this team while they find their footing. But it's going to take a long time before we get there, anyways. To find any semblance of consistency, I'm not saying Kaskamaki is going to bring that, but I think he should be a stabilizing force to the lineup at least.
Yeah, I think in last night's game against Ottawa, he was, passable. It wasn't stand out in either way, and so I think that's kind of all you can ask for from a guy like Kaskamaki. But yeah, again, with like the future focus that a lot of fans have already taken on this season, um, it's interesting to follow. And I think this is something that we're going to try to discuss on a recent or not recent an episode coming up soon and sort of check in on Blues prospects because there's been some exciting stuff, right? Adam Yurchek named, what was it, defenseman of the month in the OHL. Is
Hmm.
off to a really good start this year. Justin Carbonneau is red hot, scoring goals, and is he leading the queue right now, or is he second? Last I checked, he was second in the queue. I'm gonna pull that up now, but I mean, incredible stuff from some of the top prospects here. He is currently second in the queue for goals scored with 23. Um, he is trailing by one, so an exciting race because they're sort of he and I don't know how to pronounce it, Lacerte maybe, are kind of starting to outpace the rest of the queue. So gotta love Carbo, man. Exciting prospect, and good to see Juracek coming along as well. I mean, something that we really wanted to see out of him was have a productive season, and it's been that. He has led his team, and he's led defensemen on Brantford in points, and is one of the I think top five in points among defensemen in the O. And so good to see. Good to see. We'll try to dive deeper into some of that soon.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, let's move on to the main segment of the day. We want to talk about big picture stuff, particularly with regards to the general manager situation for the Blues. As we said, Blues fans know Army will be stepping down after this season, and Alexander Steen will be taken over as GM. And so, you know, what does this mean for the Blues? What kind of team are they, and what needs to happen in the months to come? So one of the angles that I thought we could take with this was what are the biggest questions that need to be answered before the switch is made. Alec, you also wanted to talk about what pieces he has to work with and what roles he needs to fill. Um, So are those your so with my idea of what are the biggest questions that need to be answered, do you think those are the biggest questions for you? Are what pieces and what roles um, need to be filled?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's kind of similar to my biggest question, and so I'll go ahead and pose it now because I think the two dovetail pretty nicely. My biggest question is who is my my biggest question for sort of the Blues and for Alexander Steen as putting on my pretend GM hat if I were Alexander Steen or if I were Doug Armstrong or involved in the front office. The big question on my mind would be who is the Blues core, right? Like who is a core piece and who needs who can we move on from? And I think for a long time, the core has been, Braden Shen, Robert Thomas, Jordan Cairo, Colton Parayko, and Jordan Bennington. You can maybe add a couple others in there, but like that has been the core, right? Like for a long time. Last year, we see Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg kind of join that group as they had breakout years. I think you could make arguments for Jimmy Snuggerud and Jake Neighbors in there easily as well at this point. But I mean, at that point, that's a pretty big core, and I think some of those names there are fans out there that are ready to move on from some of those names, like particularly Braden Shen comes to mind. I've even seen Jordan Bennington out there as someone that fans are ready to move on from. Um, that's sort of my big question is who is the core, right? And I think that sort of aligns with your question of what are the pieces that Alexander Steen has, right? And what roles need to be filled. So do you want to take the lead here? I mean, that's just sort of lots of questions and thoughts out there, but yeah, what do you think?
Sure. So the way that I think about the pieces that he has and what are the big, like who is going to be taking over and stepping into what roles, I think of them within tiers of within like there are three tiers really. There's like your tier one guys, which is like your untouchables, or the like this is what you have to build around, and this is what you use to build around to like the untouchables. It's the ones that you don't move on from. It's the
Mhm.
ones that you don't uh find a replacement for. It's who you are focusing your efforts on keeping.
Yeah.
Tier 2 would be the I don't know, like the nice pieces or like the helpful building blocks. Um and that could be uh that could be something that you have that you'd like to think is untouchable, but maybe if the right
Hmm.
deal comes along and blows you away, maybe you consider moving on from them. And then the tier 3 would just be like interesting prospects. And that would mostly be for prospects, like not NHL ready guys yet, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
excuse me. So that's how I would classify them. Excuse me. Slash, I guess there's a tier 3B of like to be traded, of like,
Hmm.
not pieces that you build around and not, anyways. Um, so what I find to be the most interesting, uh, or what I find to be the most central idea in this exercise of who do you keep and who do you not is to me is youth. The thing that I'm prioritizing is youth and guys who are going to have a lot of control, and team control, that is, and be parts of the core for a long time. And so that's why we'll get into specifics here in a second. But just to give an example, Jimmy Snuggerud is the first guy I name when I think of tier one building block pieces.
Yeah.
That's a guy you don't want to move on from. That's a guy who's going to be leading this team for a long time. And this can be players who are currently leading the team. Like Robert Thomas has kind of a discussion, and we'll get to where I think he lands. But um, Jimmy Snuggerud is like the prototypical tier one prospect slash player for me.
Hmm.
And so to answer your question about, how I approach this is that it's in those tiers, and the way that I focus on it is youth first and then ability second. Um, because I think that you need to build this team with a young core. Otherwise, you're not building a sustainable winner.
Yeah, I think that I agree for the most part, but I would put those two that you listed, youth and ability, on equal footing. Just because youth for youth's sake, I don't think necessarily gets you very far, um, and I think you need continuity in your team with a team like the Blues, who for whom the goal is consistency, consistent competitiveness and contention. I think continuity is really important in that you have guys, they don't have to be, 36, 37 years old, but like guys that have been around for a winning team and understand the culture and things like that. I think there is something valuable about that. But that being said, I agree that the untouchable pieces and the most important pieces should be young players with high level abilities. And so I think you're right in saying that. I think I would just put them on more of an equal playing field in my mind. But I think what you are calling untouchables, I'm kind of calling the core, and like that's sort of what I was talking about. Like who are the core pieces, and those are the players you keep and you don't move on from. And so, do you want to start the conversation there and sort of build out
Yeah.
from the middle? So you've already got yours is Jimmy Snuggerud is who tops your list. It'll be no surprise that Philip Broberg tops mine. I mean, you want to talk about ability. I think he's been the best player on the team this year. Like, I don't want to, I, you know, have thought that for a long time. And uh, sometimes it's been a little bit tongue in cheek and like, I just really like this player approach. But like so far this year, where not a lot has been going really well for the Blues. I think Philip Broberg has been amazing. Like I think he's probably having a better year than he did last year. And if he wasn't human, I think he could be, QBing the power play too. Like I think he could be PP1, PK1, and 5-on-5. Like if it wasn't, for their situation where he's already being overplayed a little bit, I think he could truly do it all. And I mean, you want to talk about ability, he's got it. You want to talk about youth, he's entering his prime, but he's only 24, so I think he's still got that going for him, right? And um, to my understanding, I saw an article from JR where he reported that um, that there haven't really been any contract talks yet, which is disappointing to me. But I think that should be a priority because I think he can be the number one defenseman, or at least consistent top pairing defenseman for this team. So I put him in my core. I put him in the untouchable tier, and it's not just because he's like my favorite player. I think he truly meets both of those criteria, and is just a fantastic player.
Yeah. Yeah, Broberg's definitely on the short list for me too. Broberg to me is like the defenseman of the future and is the future of the defense, as we'll get into needs where this team needs to address. Spoiler alert, defense is one of them. It's very high up on the list. Um, and I definitely see that with Broberg being like the only piece on that defense, that a real um, there's a real worry without him on there if you lose him. So
Yeah,
Broberg is definitely in my like top 4 of players to be named for the core. Excuse me.
nice. Oh, we're kind of going back and forth here so far. So do you wanna tell us who's next on the list for you?
Yeah, and I go back and forth on this one because I know who my next two or three names would be.
Hmm.
Um, I think I'm gonna go with this wasn't who I originally thought it was gonna be, but I think I'm gonna actually go with Robert Thomas as my next name.
I think that's right. Yeah, like I think there are people out there who would put him in the next tier down, but I think this is the right call.
Yeah, and just the like you want to talk about pieces you cannot replace. Robert Thomas would be if he was not on this team, his loss would be felt tenfold because the Blues already don't have a star player or like a superstar level player.
Hmm.
Thomas is the closest thing they have, and even then he like without that on this team, I should say, there would be that gap, that void would be so massive, and I think people would wish that we did have Robert Thomas. So that's just a piece you can't replace. He's young, he's cheap, he's everything you look for. He's Robert Thomas. Yeah, that's my
It's a
next
bird. It's a
my
plane.
next
No, it's Robert Thomas.
yeah.
I think that's the right pick. I mean, like you said, it's hard to find an elite playmaking, top six centerman like him. They don't grow on trees, and I think he'd be the one C for a lot of teams in this league. And so yeah, I think that's the right pick. You've already got him signed long term, and I think he has a chance to be one of the all time greats if he plays his entire career in St. Louis. I think I mean, he's already sort of breaking records and um, maybe not breaking records necessarily, but like you look at the milestones he reaches. I think one of the most recent ones was like fewest games to a certain point total or something like that, and he was second only to Bernie Federko, and so for the Blues organization, and so a pace like that and a player like that, I think it has the opportunity and potential to be like a really special union for a really long time, and so that's one that I would agree with in keeping him as long as you can because I think he's fantastic. I'm gonna be honest with you, dude. Outside of these three, I don't know how many more I would put on this list. Like there are some that I can see an argument for, right? Like the three that come to mind for me that I might mention next um, would be Dylan Holloway, Dalibor Dvorsky, um, and I guess Jordan Cairo. But like for all three of those guys, I could see a case, for them not to be on that tier. I'm not saying I don't want them to be on the Blues. I'm not saying I think they should be traded, but I could I could see an argument for them not being in that tier. That being said, I would personally put them closer to like untouchable core type piece than just a solid building block kind of piece. Um, but the reason I say that is for each of them, just to sort of go through like Jordan Cairo, I think probably has the best case to be like a core piece, but um, there's the aspect of can he ever be like a 40 goal scorer? He's come so close a few times, and maybe if there's a great return for him, you move on. But again, I would probably put him in this group. Dylan Holloway, I mean, it's really similar. Like it's hard to find a dynamic guy like that who can play on both sides of the puck. But you know that is a prototype that you could replace. It would be tough, but like look at a guy like Justin Carbonneau. He has like a similar like dynamic driven profile in my mind, and he's already in the system. And then Dalibor Dvorsky, we just kind of don't know how high he can climb, and so I don't know if I'd put him as an untouchable prospect. But right now, I'm kind of leaning Kyrou and Holloway at least probably move into the core for me. Um, but again, like I don't think they have as surefire of a case as the other two. And maybe I'm being a little bit too cynical on these two. But what are your thoughts?
I actually am going to make the case to move them into the core building block
Okay,
pieces.
all three.
Um, no, I would say Kairu and Holloway.
Okay, I'm cool with that. But yeah, let's hear your case.
And Dvorsky we'll get to probably next. But Holloway was actually the guy that I was going to put next in there before
Okay,
Kairu because to me, like I said, that youth is so important. It means that you could project so much more upside than what he's showing. And
that's
what
true.
he's already showing is that he's a good hockey player already at 24, 23 years old.
He's 24. Yeah.
Um, 24. Okay. At 24 years old, he's not even close to entering his prime yet, and he's still a be safe called a 20 goal scorer
Oh
in
yeah.
average year. Like
Yeah,
that is
for sure.
already a very valuable piece, and you could project that he's probably closer to a 30 goal scorer in his prime. He hits a lot, like he's sneakily a hits guy. He plays really physical. He plays blues hockey. That I think he's got a lot of the intangibles and the tangibles that you look for. That Dylan Holloway is exactly the kind of piece that you want to build around, because maybe you could replace his benefit, or excuse me, you could replace his what he offers in the aggregate, but in finding a single player to do what Dylan Holloway did, I mean that's why a guy like Zach Bolduc was so expendable. I think is because
All
that
right, all right. You know what? You've convinced me. I think I was being too harsh on Dylan Holloway. I think his injury troubles to start the year and his slow start maybe gave me a little bit of recency bias. But you're right. You're so right.
looking forward to how you want to build a team for the next, you know, 5 to 7 years. You want a guy like Dylan Holloway anchoring your middle six. So
And I think a big part of that is I think he's got a similar he's a similar kind of player in my mind to Seth Jarvis, who I really like. I think they kind of offer some similar things. And like Seth Jarvis, if I well I guess I am a Canes fan. He's untouchable to me as a Canes fan, and so to have I guess kind of like a similar version of that for the Blues. You're right. You're right. I think Holloway should be a core piece.
And Kairu is a lot of it to me is contract driven. I think given what he's being paid,
Yeah.
he's already living up well past his contract value.
Yeah.
And I think that that alone makes it ridiculous to want to trade Kairu. Um, that's not even getting into what he offers on the ice and the type of player that he is. Like I said, you want these types of pieces to anchor your middle six. Maybe on, the Florida Panthers, Jordan Kyrou isn't a top line player, but that doesn't mean that he can't anchor the top line for the time being while the Blues figure it out. And then when his aging curve starts to decrease, that's like the perfect level of veteran mentorship with a little bit of skill that you want anchoring, your team.
Yeah.
And that's in a very pessimistic outlook of Jordan Kyrou's career. Like if he doesn't get any better, and if this is all he is for the rest of his career, that's still a valuable piece worth paying $8 million for. That's in the worst case scenario. Like in the average scenario where he gets a little bit better, and offers, I mean, we've already seen the development in his game come, especially on the defensive side of the puck that we never thought would come there. And now
Mm-hmm.
he's one of the better defensive players on the team. And, there's a case for it in the league. Like he's in the top probably 25th percentile of defensive players.
Yeah.
Um, that already, like these already individually make things worth it, and you total it up into the totality of what Jordan Kyrou is, who's a scoring winger who can make some crafty plays, has pretty good playmaking ability, and is a really good defender. And you don't think that's a core piece? I mean, I don't really know what to tell you at that point, because the way the all of the value that you were getting from this skater, you would have to replace in like 3 or 4 different skaters. And sure, maybe he's a little disappointing compared to the very high highs that were thrust upon him when you saw the level of skill that he's capable of achieving. Maybe he won't ever get to that level. That doesn't mean that he's suddenly not a valuable piece and one that you have to trade for assets that you will probably have to replace in the aggregate anyway. I would rather have all of that in one player on a very affordable contract that you can have anchoring your middle six for the next, 6 years.
I think you make a really good argument for both of these guys. And so yeah, I think they're um, you have convinced me. I think they pretty easily slide into the core then. Does that round out the core? So we've got Jimmy Snuggerud, Philip Roberg, Robert Thomas, Dylan Holloway, and Jordan Kyrou so far. I, given the sort of timeline right now, don't see anyone else in this group. Do you?
I think there's a
Other
case
than Pius Suter.
I think
No,
there's
go
a
on.
case to be made for my mind is going blank. Dalibor Dvorsky.
Right.
But I would actually put him in the second tier if I
I
were the
think
one making the list.
yeah.
And it's my podcast, so I say
It's Alex
I
podcast. You heard
say
it here
that's the
first.
core.
I think I agree. I think I'm in the same boat. And so what that means, right? So from the standpoint of our concept today, right, when we're looking at the general manager situation and sort of the management of this team, you've got Robert Thomas and you've got Jordan Kyrou signed long term. And so what that means is get some twin contracts worked out for Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway, right? I think that should be priority number one. And it's not like you have to get it done before the summer, right? Because by the summer, they're RFAs. So you have a little time, you have a little comfortability to work with here, but don't let it run out. Because pressure can bring out the worst in these kinds of negotiations at times. And I think these are two guys you want to keep around. And so figure out how to sign both of them to long-term deals. I think given the flurry of deals we saw for young defensemen to start the year, right? Lane Hudson, Thomas Harley, Jackson Lacombe, those kinds of deals. I'd be looking 7 years for Philip Broberg, and probably in the range of 8 to 10, $11 million. I mean, get it as low as you can, but I would say 7 by 9. I think for a guy like Broberg, and I'd be pretty happy with that. And something similar for Dylan Holloway, I personally think would be worth it. And so I think that should be priority number one is getting those guys signed long term. Then you've got those four, Broberg, Holloway, Thomas, and Kyrou around. And then you got some time to work out a Snuggerud extension. And so I think those should be, when it comes to the core from a GMing standpoint, some of the priorities there. Anything to add before we move on to the next category?
No, I think you placed that all really well. And yeah, anything under $8 million for Broberg would be an absolute steal. And I'll say anything under like 7 um for his name is Dylan
Holloway.
Holloway.
Yeah.
Would
Um,
also be a great deal.
yeah, for sure. All right, in the interest of time, let's move through the rest of these categories a little quicker. So, Alec, just give me your list of guys that are in this second tier who you sort of described as like good, solid building blocks, right? Good to great players who, you keep on a winning team, but if the right deal comes along, you might move. Does that sort of summarize this category nicely?
Yeah, I think so.
So, who is on your list for the Blues right now?
The first one on my list is probably the aforementioned Dalibor Dvorsky
Yeah.
because I think he's closer to the keep category than the trade off. But the Blues are looking for that marquee piece. The name
Hmm.
that's gotten thrown around is Brady Kachuk. It's not happening. But someone of that level um,
Right.
would be a would be what they're looking for. And to get that, you would have to give up someone um
Like a
like a
Devo.
Dalibor Dvorsky, yeah, as
Yeah.
like the key piece in that trade. And so that's the scenario to me where Dvorsky is not part of the core. I'm not just trading off Dvorsky for more picks or trading him off for like a Jake DeBrusk type player, like an
Yeah.
upgrade, or a
Yeah.
Brock Besser type player, like an upgrade, but not
Yeah.
necessarily um, the pinnacle of what you're trying to do. Um, I am only trading him if it's involved in a massive type deal.
Right. I think that's the right idea. Um, yeah, nothing to add on Devo. I think he is sort of like at the top of this list and maybe bleeding into the other category a little bit, but um, I also see a scenario where I'd be willing to part with him, as tough as that would be. And so I think, um, yeah, I think that's well put. Next on my list in this category is Jake Neighbors. I think he could he is on a path to be, if not captain, then an alternate. And so I think he's definitely going to be a part of the leadership core before too long. I'm sure there are some Blues fans out there who'd be mad that we didn't put him in the untouchable category, and so I think that sort of speaks to what he means to the Blues and to the Blues fan base. And so I think he at least belongs on this solid building blocks um, list in my mind. Do you dispute that, or is that kind of what you think as well?
No, I think that's fair.
Cool, cool, cool. Who else? Who else you got?
Um, we can probably go through these a little bit faster. I think Colton Parayko is on that list.
Yeah,
Um,
I think with Pareko, I I would put him in this category, and
right.
I would consider putting him higher. Like I think he has a case to be a core piece, but I don't think he's untouchable because of the timeline. You know, I think the age of Pareko and sort of the way the rest of the team looks, and maybe they the retool that we thought was over has to continue for a little bit, and so like maybe just the timing doesn't quite work out, and so I think that's why he would be bumped down to this category. But I think he definitely belongs at least in this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I got nothing to add there. Just that he's a really good player that you want to build around if you can,
Yeah,
and um, yeah. Uh, Otherwise, in this list, do
I
we want
think
to
Buch
include?
Navich. Sorry.
Do I was going to say, do we want to include Carbonneau on this list at all, or is he like not eligible?
Um, I mean, in the category of like interesting prospects, like that was sort of the third that you put. I don't know if you meant like
But
NHL
like,
level
I
young
don't know if he's
players.
like a tier above that. Would be my own.
I I am personally like inclined to put him there, but I think you and I are pretty high on him. I think a lot of Blues fans are pretty high on him too. Um, I'll say this: I think given the fact that you traded away Zach Bolduc, he kind of has to until another player comes along that can provide something similar. I think he has to be um, in this category.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I think when we look at the top of the Blues pipeline, right? Like your Carbonos, your Yuricheks, those kinds of players, I think can be kind of included wherever we would want to put them. I don't think this is the conversation to really dive down all the way through the pipeline, right? And so I think um, the fact that he is one of the top guys, I think makes him eligible for wherever on this list. And so I would put him here in the solid building blocks that you hold on to unless something perfect comes along.
Okay. So, do you want to do like a batch of a few?
Sure. I mean, is who else in your mind is in here
Um, I have my list might be like coming to a close, I think.
for the solid building blocks? Would you put?
Yeah.
Let me just throw a few names at you, all right, and
Mm-hmm.
tell me what you think of these guys for this category. Pavel Buchnevich, Jordan Bennington, and Joel Hofer. Um, I think all have a case to be in here, but I think the case for Buchnevich to be a solid building block is like the Buchnevich that we expect, right? Not what we've gotten this year. if he's going to look like this for the rest of his contract, which is impossible to know. He is very comfortably in the to be traded category for me. But if he can figure something out, I think he has a case to be like a solid building blocks piece. And then with the goalies, you don't have anything better than these two coming in the pipeline. And so I could see a case for like one of them to be untouchable. But I think that it might be a little bit unrealistic. And so like I would put, instead of one of them being untouchable, I would put both of them in like the solid piece tier. Um, Thoughts on those three?
I think Hofer to me falls into that third tier of interesting prospect,
Okay.
just because there's been a little bit too much variance for what I like to get from a goalie in his couple years, and I think that um, I don't know. I think I'm still waiting to see it with Hofer, like to really see it, and he is like definitely on the higher end of that list as pieces I'd like to keep around. But if the difference is like acquiring Hofer, or sorry, keeping Hofer versus he's the piece that gets you a, I don't know. I can't really think of an example right now, but if he's what it takes to get you a trade, and if you need to draft someone and just do the NHL thing of like have these Stuart Skinner-esque backups for a few years. I know
Yeah.
Skinner's a little bit memed right now, so maybe not the right example, but like a Joey Decord or
Mm-hmm.
like a backup caliber goalies for a year or two. That's not to me the biggest deal. Binner,
I'll just say this about Hofer: he stuck up for Philip Broberg last night, and so in my mind, he's a core piece. So I'll just say that.
love it, love it. Binner's tough. What's your lean on Binner? Um,
I think
I
if
think I
we,
lean tier two.
I think if we put one like from a GMing standpoint, right? Like I think you have to with each of these guys, you have to take the whole team perspective, right? When you're a GM with each player that we're discussing, and when it comes to the goalies, if you want to remain somewhat competitive, you cannot get rid of both of them, in my mind.
Right.
And
Agree.
so, yeah, I think Hofer, not everywhere, but I think there are plenty of teams in the league that if he was traded this most recent offseason, he would be starting or at least the 1B. Like what like in Buffalo, I think he could maybe even start over Skinner and Pickard in Edmonton. And maybe that wouldn't have been the case at the beginning of the season, but like their play to this point would have warranted it in my mind. And I know Hofer has been bad this year too, you know. But this is just a scenario where he's traded over the offseason. Columbus, like I'm not convinced about Merzlikins. Um, you know, the list could go on, but I think there are teams out there where he has a case to be the starter, and so that in my mind bumps him up a little bit. I think it's just the fact that Jordan Bennington has him blocked right now that maybe he's bumped down a tier, but I think I don't have a huge problem with him being in the interesting prospects list because I agree if he is what it takes to get in a high level piece, maybe not a superstar, but a high level piece, I'm okay with that. And so I'm good with him being in that tier. But if we put him there, I think Bennington has to be in this second tier of you hold on to him until the right deal comes.
Agree.
Cool. And then what's your thoughts
And
on
then
Buchnevich?
to me, I'm actually pretty out on Buchnevich, um, just because this is now 2 years of this trend, and
Okay.
it's not known that he will be like this level of just slow and poor, but it doesn't mean that he won't either.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really a real argument point. I don't know. I guess just there's nothing that's showing me that Buchnevich is capable of turning it around. And so I'm kind of the mindset that I don't like the warning signs are there for me with Buchnevich, and
Hmm.
the most important thing, less about his play, is I value that youth so much, and
Okay.
I
Yeah,
think that for that reason, um, I would be looking to move on from Buchnevich in this if the Blues were to try a retool.
that's fair. So you have him sort of in that bottom to be traded category.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think I agree. I think that's fair. You've done a good job of convincing me of a lot of things today. So do you have any other players in this solid building blocks, good to great level pieces tier? Do you have any other names you want to mention?
Um, I don't
I
think
think
so.
for me that about does it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Before we move on to the last two tiers here, I don't think we should get to every single player. I think there are names like, um, you know, Tyler Tucker, Bukestad, Suter, who, you know, could be in this to be traded category, but you can't trade everyone. And so, like, I think we should mainly talk about the big names here. But if you think there is a case for any of these to be included there, I'm fine with that. Let's move on to the interesting prospects tier. Um, and in the interest of time, we're already at an hour, so I'll just go ahead and give you my list. We already have Hofer there. I'm putting Yurchek there, and I'm putting Mayu there. Anyone that you dispute or anyone that you would add. My list is not super long for interesting prospects because again, I don't think we can go through the entire pipeline. But what are your thoughts?
I don't know. Did we ever come to a decision on Carbonneau?
I thought we put him in the
Okay.
solid building blocks tier. Yeah,
In that case, maybe Pikarchik, just because I'm
yeah,
really a
okay,
sucker for
yeah,
his style of play. That's a
I
that's
like
a
it.
personal one.
I like it. But you don't dispute Mayu being here. I know that some people will when they watch
No,
this.
I agree. I agree. I think that the what you have like on the defense, you need pieces. Even if they don't work out, you need something like to try. And Mayu has shown flashes, so I do like Mayu being here.
Cool. Um, so we've got Hofer, Mayu, Juracek, and Pekarchik. Any others that you want to mention?
Excuse me. No, I think that's pretty good. Maybe
Cool.
Tucker. I don't know. Nah.
Um, I think to me, he's just sort of in the category of like he's not like a huge positive or negative. Like he's just a solid piece, and you got to have bodies out there. Um, I'm not like itching to trade him, but I'm also not like that confident about putting him in like an interesting prospect or don't trade him. That kind of conversation. But I think he
I
is
just
like
like him.
he's starting to make his case. Sure. Um, I'm trying to find. Let me look up like the system real quick and see if there's any other names that jump out to me to sort of be in this tier. And again, we're going to have an episode coming up soon where we really dive in to the Blues prospect system. Maybe have a special guest on to help us do that. I think it's a good time to do that. So we'll have longer conversations about all these guys sometime soon. But for now, we'll just stick with the bigger names. Um, I don't think I would put anyone else in here. I mean, like the other names are like Yeko, Fisher, and I don't think yeah, maybe Stenberg I think could be in this tier. I might say Stenberg. I might say Lindstein. Given what you're sort of talking about priorities being defense, maybe Lindstein could belong in this category. You know what? I'm gonna say that I think Stenberg and Lindstein both belong um,
I think
in this
that's fair.
tier. Cool.
I have no objection. I don't really have a case for them, but I have no objection to them being in there.
Okay. All right. I think that rounds out our prospect tier, our to be traded tier. Give me your quick hits on this one.
Buchnevich, um, Shen? Question mark.
I think so.
Um, Falk
Yep. I think now is the time, man. He's like, it's really funny when you look at
for sure.
when you look at the list of top performers in fantasy of defensemen. He's like top 10, and it's kind of crazy.
That is crazy. How far we've come.
Yeah.
Um, that's
Not that they base these decisions on fantasy, but I'm just saying he's had a more
yeah.
productive year than he has in a long time.
Would you throw Cam Fowler on there or no?
I think so. You know, like I don't think you're going to like I don't think you're gonna find a deal for Fowler, and I don't think you're like um I don't think he'd really approve a trade unless it's like a really good situation. Um, so I mean, like I would put him on the list of guys who should explore moving, but I don't know that you're going to be able to move many, if any, of these guys, to be honest. But I think yeah, I think he might belong on this list.
I think that's
Um,
pretty good for me.
I think that is I think that's everyone. Yeah. Um, Suter and Bukestad, I mean, I could see being on this list just because of timeline stuff. Bukestad more so than Suter, but like again,
Definitely Bukestad more than Suter.
we're sort of getting into the weeds here of bottom six guys,
Yeah.
and it's not like these are huge needle movers whether they stay or go. Um, yeah, I think that's a pretty good list. So just to sort of round out our discussion here, we've talked about the core pieces, right? You've got Thomas and Kyrou. You want to extend Broberg, Holloway, and Snug. As for solid pieces, guys, you keep, you build around. We've got Devo, Neighbors, Pareko, Carbo, and Binner. Um, some interesting ones there, but I think the young guys you sort of look to keep around. I'm really excited to see what Carbonneau can do once he's ready for the NHL. I think that's coming soon. Um, yeah, I think that's sort of our conversation. And so getting back to the core of what we're talking about, right? When next summer Alexander Steen takes over as GM, and um, you know he has the reins. Uh, what should be the biggest priorities? We sort of talked about who should be traded and who should be extended, but do you have any other thoughts here about like roles that need to be filled or areas of focus for this team? What do you got? Big picture for Alexander Steen.
I think the focus still has to be on the defense. I think the Blues have proven to be able to develop a decent forward core and scout forwards with especially the Justin Carbonneau pick. And of our untouchables, it was pretty much just Philip Broberg, if I'm not mistaken, who was the only defenseman on that
Mm-hmm.
list. So
Yep.
you're looking at a lot of dart throws and a lot of home run swings, to be fair, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't also be trying to hit for average, if that analogy makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that the defense long term is where I'm most worried about this team still. They figured it out somewhat in the short term, but then what we're looking for is something beyond Cam Fowler and beyond
Yep.
Colton Pareko being the only defender on this team. Now they have Colton Pareko and Philip Broberg, but we're still a little ways off from where we want to be. So that's
Yep.
where I would address first.
I think I'm right there with you. I think that should be an area of focus. And to be honest, I think um, the goaltending position, the goalie position should be um, one to monitor. I think it's not something that needs to be fixed right now. Look, they've been horrible this year, and so it needs to be fixed in the sense that you need to get these guys back on track. But you're not in a position where you're like, uh, we have to figure something out here, and you're desperate to go out there and find a solution. But are you going to trade Binnington? Are you going to let Hofer take over? Are you going to extend both of them? So sort of that should be on the list of things to figure out what the approach will be. And then I'll just say continue to like target players in this same category of guys that we have in the untouchable category of young NHL level players that are that have the ability, and like Broberg and Holloway I think are like the uh, the prototypical kind of player you should be looking for. Go out there and find some diamonds in the rough. It's easier said than done, but what teams out there are willing to part with some younger players, and it's like I said, it's not going to be easy, but I think that should be an area of focus, and being ready for those opportunities when they come. They might be few and far between, but those are the kinds of opportunities that this team will need to take advantage of. So that would be on my list as well. Um, and then just to wrap it all up, from a GMing standpoint, do you think there's anything that needs to be done for the rest of this regular season before the switch is made? I think there's been a lot of rumors out there that Doug Armstrong is active and he's listening and he's calling teams and stuff like that. Um, I don't think Doug Armstrong is going to blow it up right before he walks out of the door. Like I don't think this is going to be a fire sale at the deadline. Um, Unless that's what Alexander Steen wants, and they're both on the same page about that. So, um, but I don't see that being the case. So, in my mind, what needs to happen for the rest of this regular season is see which pieces you can move at the deadline. Teams are desperate out there, and um, I think top of the list for me are Justin Falk and Braden Shen. There are teams out there who are going to be willing to pay for a guy like Shen, who has the big game experience. He has the grit, has the offensive ability, solid middle six offensive ability, and he has the versatility where he can play center and he can play wing. That's a valuable player, and there's going to be teams out there who are loading up for a playoff push who might want some of that. And so see what you can get for Schenner. And when it comes to Justin Falk, right-handed defensemen are hard to come by, and so in a year where he looks better than he has in a long time, see what you can get in return. It might not be much, but I think it's time to sort of cut your losses with Falk, and you couldn't ask for a better situation with him, with his performance this year, given what we've seen in recent years. So those are the two that really come to mind. And so midseason, see what you can get for those guys. But again, I don't think they're blowing it up. But closing thoughts on that?
Excuse me. Yeah, I would focus more on Falk, I think, than Schenner. I think what Army has to do is move Falk. What he can do is move one other piece, whether that's Shen or Buchnevich or someone else. Um, I think that uh, I think that would be like something that he can do to set up this team well, but is not necessarily required to have a successful season. But definitely Justin Falk, given the saga that has been the Justin Falk experience, now is never going to be the better time. Get that done at the deadline,
Yeah,
or even before, before an injury or a fall off comes.
yeah, agreed. All right, that's our state of the union for the Blues and for the GM situation and who the core is and who needs to be gone. So I think that'll do it for us this time. We appreciate everyone tuning in and sticking with us. We know it's been a little while since we've been on here, so um, we hope to be back up and live streaming again soon. That'll be one to monitor, and we'll try to do our best to keep everyone updated on that front. When it comes to the Blues, they play Montreal tonight. Uh, Away, and then they'll have a busy couple weeks here. They'll come back home. They'll play Boston on Tuesday, go to Nashville on Thursday, back home for Chicago on Friday, and then they've got 3 more home games the following week. And so yeah, busy couple weeks. Some good teams in there, some mediocre teams in there. So we'll see what we can get. We'll be back here to react to those and any other news that surfaces up to that point. But we appreciate everyone tuning into this one. We'll see you next time. If you haven't already, we'd appreciate if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, follow, rate, review wherever you listen. We're on Spotify and Apple. And then follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, where we try to post a lot of other stuff. And love to interact with everyone on all those platforms. You can leave comments on Spotify, all that good stuff. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.